It says anybody that takes the mark of the beast, that their name is not written in the Lamb's book of life.
How do you not take it?
How do you not take the mark?
Yeah.
All right, let's see it.
You have to be willing to die, suffer.
No, I did not grow up with this, but I have heard from a number of people who grew up evangelical that they were conditioned starting from a pretty young age to believe that they were living in the last days, that the world was getting increasingly wicked, and that at some point they were going to be required to give up their lives rather than adopt one of the world's wicked ways as a means of costly signaling to show Jesus how much they loved him. And that's a phenomenally traumatizing thing for a kid to grow up with. But I know most folks grow out of thinking that Christians in America are going to be required to give up their lives just to show an all-knowing deity how much they love him. But I guess some people have not grown out of that. And the mark of the beast is just symbolic of the persecution and the corruption of the late 1st century CE Roman Empire. Most scholars agree that it is gematria that is encoding a reference primarily to Nero Caesar, but perhaps to other Roman emperors as well. But it has absolutely no relevance whatsoever to any society or any people living after the 1st century CE. It's not a prophecy about today.
I think about there's Christians right now all over the world being killed by the hundreds of thousands. We just don't talk about it.
Right, it only gets talked about in rhetorical contexts where American evangelicals need to be able to leverage the persecution of Christians to support some point. It's never actually about helping those Christians who are being persecuted and killed in other parts of the world. It's never about trying to avoid the authoritarian forms of government that result in that persecution and that killing. It is always about leveraging the persecution and the suffering of others as evidence that American evangelicals either are being persecuted by the folks they are actively oppressing, or that they need to continue to actively oppress those minoritized, marginalized, oppressed groups. Otherwise, there will come a day when they do take over and persecute Christians. And this is how Christians find themselves in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation was written in a time period when Christians were in the overwhelming minority and were easily persecuted if someone felt like it. Then Christianity took over the Roman Empire, and Christians have been in positions of privilege and power ever since. But if we want to read ourselves into that text, we need to find a persecutor. And so what do? We go look at the people who are fighting for equality, and we say, look at that, they're trying to take away our privilege and our position of power. They're persecuting us. And then we just concoct a bunch of imaginary scenarios and say, see, they're persecuting us. We need to keep them under our boot.
They're killing them in China. They're killing them in North Korea. They're killing them in Africa. They're killing them in the Middle East. Why are we above those people?
The places where Christians are persecuted and where state violence is leveraged against them are overwhelmingly authoritarian regimes, where certain ethnic and religious groups are given privilege and power and leverage it to persecute ethnically and religiously minoritized groups. And so it's odd that the response on the part of folks like these is to advocate for an authoritarian regime where ethnic and religious groups are given privilege and power that they can leverage against ethnically and religiously minoritized groups and use violence to keep them marginalized and oppressed. And this is part of the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is not about dismantling the structures of power that facilitate these abuses. It's just about trading places with the people who are using the systems of power to abuse. And so Christians today who think the answer is to do the same rather than to dismantle those structures of power are just engaged in the same revenge fantasy.
You think America gets to dodge this at some point? Absolutely not. It's a perilous thing to bear the name of Jesus Christ in this world.
Not in the United States of America, it's not. White male cis hetero Christians are the single most privileged and powerful demographic on this side of the planet. But it's just like a wealthy white male cis hetero Christian to appropriate the suffering of other Christians in other parts of the world to try to validate their own need to remain in a position of privilege and power, and to try to literally demonize already vulnerable groups to rationalize their continued minoritization and marginalization and oppression. And the fit for this video has been Chippendale Rescue Rangers. It's a little sweaty, but rescue ranging is work.